I felt like skipping the dramatic, philosophical introduction for this video. Let's get straight to the point. Given that it's the month of October, and given that I'm on an endless pursuit of the profound, I thought it might be a worthwhile challenge to figure out which horror movie had the most profound ending ever. Note that I did not say the greatest horror movie ending, because there's too many of those to choose from. And horror is too subjective a genre for there to ever be a firm consensus. When I say profound, I refer to anything that demonstrates depth, great knowledge, or insight. While horror doesn't usually cross into this territory, there are horror movies that compel reflection just as much as they compel feelings of disturbance. This can be key to a film's lasting success. If something about a horror film inspires deep thought, the audience member will have to keep thinking about the movie and, by proxy, re-traumatize themselves with all the disturbing things they saw. This is why the ending for The Shining is an automatic candidate. We're still talking about what happened at the end of that movie 4 decades later. There's the ending of American Psycho, The Lighthouse, 1 or 2 of David Lynch's movies, all profound in their own right. But which is the most profound? It took me longer than I thought it would to pick my nominee. This is because the film I eventually chose was blocked out of my memory for most of the deliberation, on account of its unconscionable content. But when I remembered it, I realized there was no other possible choice. If you're a horror fan, you have almost certainly heard of the film Martyrs. This is because it has a reputation for being the most violent, sickening horror movie you might ever watch. And it is due to this reputation that most of you probably haven't watched it. Admittedly, I avoided it for the longest time due to this reason. And I can confirm, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, that Martyrs might be the most violent, explicit, disquieting horror movie ever. It's so excessively violent that I can understand why so many critics thought it crossed the line from the artistic into the pointlessly obscene. Hell, I struggled editing this video together because there were so few clips that I could safely put in a video without risking demonetization. But ultimately, I disagree with those who say the film is pointlessly obscene, and it is mostly due to the film's ending. There is an unresolvable question that the audience is left with at the end of this movie. A question that brings out a philosophical impulse in every person who watches it. It is a question that is, in part, linked to the excessive violence and whether or not it had artistic merit, whether there was a point to it. The numinous nature of that question, and the variety of philosophical interpretations it elicits, motivates my belief that Martyrs might have the most profound ending to any horror movie ever. Today, I will explain the plot of Martyrs, particularly for those who do not have the stomach to watch the movie. Then, I will attempt to do the impossible. I will attempt to give a definitive answer to that philosophical question. I will do this by drawing upon the words of the man who directed Martyrs, as well as honestly contend with other interpretations of the ending. If you have already seen Martyrs and don't want to hear the synopsis, please feel free to skip to this point in the video. The film mainly focuses on 2 characters, the first of which is a woman named Lucy. At a very young age, she was kidnapped by members of a secret society and tortured. Luckily for her, she was able to escape her imprisonment and found shelter at an orphanage. But unfortunately, she was stuck with lasting psychological damage. Unable to contend with the violence that was inflicted upon her, she spends the rest of her life searching for the people responsible for kidnapping her and torturing her. Towards the beginning of the film, she uncovers the identity of those who tortured her as a child, the Belfond family. She goes to their home and murders not only the perpetrators, but their children as well, hoping to find catharsis for the pain she had dealt with all her life. After she does this, she calls up her best friend Anna, a young woman that she first met when she found shelter at the aforementioned orphanage. When Anna arrives, she is horrified by the carnage that Lucy inflicted, but ultimately decides to help Lucy clean up the mess. Soon after Anna arrives, it becomes clear to Lucy that murdering the family did not bring her the resolution she desired. The pain of this is compounded when Anna reveals skepticism about Lucy's claims of childhood torture. All of this culminates in a psychological breakdown that leads Lucy to self-terminate. The next day, Anna discovers a secret passageway, which leads her to a prison which contains a brutalized, emaciated woman, proving that Lucy was right all along. Though Anna attempts to aid the woman, cleaning her and providing medical attention, this is all ultimately in vain, because soon after, a group of people arrive at the house, kill the woman, and capture Anna. The leader of this group, known literally as Mademoiselle, explains to Anna what is going on. She and the society she leads are attempting to discover the secrets of the afterlife through the creation of martyrs. The martyrs are typically young women who they torture to the point of death, but not so much that they actually die. The society's hope is that when these martyrs are on the brink of death, the martyr can catch a glimpse into the afterlife and relay what they see to their torturers. The rest of the film shows Anna suffering the worst imaginable forms of torture until she reaches that transcendent state. She gazes into the afterlife and relays what she saw to Mademoiselle. The society convenes to find out what Anna saw. While they wait for Mademoiselle's announcement, her assistant stands outside her door. She asks the assistant if he can imagine what comes after death. When he says no, Mademoiselle produces a pistol and tells the assistant to keep doubting. She then uses the pistol to self-terminate. The question that has puzzled me and so many viewers for over a decade is what Anna saw, and what about it made Mademoiselle want to self-terminate. There are as many attempted explanations for this question as there are interpretations of what actually happens after death, and with both, there is no canonical interpretation. That said, there is empirical information we can draw upon, information that might be able to steer us towards a closer approximation of the truth, and that comes from the one person who does know what Anna said, the writer and director of Martyrs, Pascal Laugier. Back around the time the film came out, Laugier did some interviews with people who asked him what the meaning of the film is. What was the purpose of the film's extreme violence? He gave a couple of interesting answers. First, the film is apparently a metaphor for what Laugier believes to be the decline of Western civilization. Quote, "I really believe that the Western world is sick. Martyrs is almost a work of prospective fiction that shows a dying world, almost like a pre-apocalypse. It's a world where evil triumphed a long time ago, where consciences have died out under the reign of money, and where people spend their time hurting one another. It's a metaphor, of course, but the film describes things that are not that far from what we're experiencing today." Laugier then goes on to say that while the extreme violence in the film is primarily a reflection of his view of the world's darkness, it is also a questioning. Quote, "For me, the martyr represents the one who, having no other choice but to suffer, manages to do something with this pain. Since we don't believe in anything, since the world is increasingly divided between winners and losers, what is left to the losers but to do something with their pain? Deep down, it's what the film is about." I believe the answer to the film's ultimate question lies hidden in these quotes. It seems to me that Laugier was trying to ask himself and the viewer what purpose there could be in these doomed scenarios. Could something good come out of a situation like Anna's? Imagine that you, like her, were locked away in an inescapable dungeon, doomed to suffer the worst forms of torture. Nobody would find her. Nobody would answer for her death. Can something be quote-unquote done with the pain that Anna and Lucy experienced in these situations? If not, then what kind of world would allow for this pointless, cruel violence to happen? Phrased in a different context, if you believe in God, then what kind of God would allow this? Should we just bring about the apocalypse, to use Laugier's word, in order to stop the misery? Granted, it's a very basic existential question, one that has been asked millions of times, but the original potency of that question is rediscovered through Martyrs, via its brutal violence. Of course, that existential question has only two potential answers. There is either no ultimate transcendent meaning to the suffering of life, or there is. Let's start by saying, hypothetically, that there is no afterlife, and we apply this interpretation to Martyrs. Many people believe that Mademoiselle self-terminated because there was no afterlife, and thus no ultimate meaning to life's suffering, including the suffering that her society caused to people like Anna and Lucy. Therefore, she self-terminated out of guilt and wanted to save people from that knowledge. This is a perfectly reasonable interpretation, one of the better ones. It does bring up some questions though. First, the movie does imply that there is something, what with the beam of holy light that we see in Anna's eye. Now, there are neurotransmitters and endorphins that trigger in response to dying, which have been known to cause euphoric sensations and visions, such as looking through a tunnel, which is what Anna appears to see. Fine, maybe that chemical illusion played out, and when it was over, Anna saw that there was nothing after death. That's possible. But how would the society know that Anna's testimony was reliable? What if she lied? Given the empirically driven and morally bereft nature of Mademoiselle's society, I would think that they would have done repeated experiments to back up what Anna said. And even if the response was the same every time, I would think that the society would have prepared themselves to accept the truth long beforehand and build off of that knowledge. For these reasons, it makes no sense to me that Mademoiselle would self-terminate after just one completed experiment, nor does it make sense for her to do it out of guilt. If she did it out of guilt, wouldn't she have told the other members of the society to stop what they were doing before she died? While the interpretation of there not being an afterlife is reasonable, I think it makes more thematic, dramatic, and logical sense that Anna did witness the afterlife and extract the meaning of life therefrom. I say this particularly because knowing the true meaning of life would, I think, be something that would make Mademoiselle self-terminate after one experiment. Why? I will begin my argument by returning to Mademoiselle's haunting final phrase, "Keep doubting." To me, this phrase implies that the whole point of life is to strive towards the ultimate meaning of life through a series of sufferings. If we discover that meaning beforehand, it renders the journey of life pointless. It's like if you were to learn about every aspect of a movie before actually watching it. What every shot looked like, what everybody said, what the musical cues were. What's the point in watching the movie after that? It is the doubt of what will happen that fuels the purpose of the journey. In Mademoiselle's case, it seems that by knowing the ultimate meaning of life, that fuel, that doubt, was eviscerated. Thus, her life was, paradoxically, rendered meaningless. She needed to self-terminate because there was nothing left to strive for. She reached the top of the mountain. There was nowhere left to go but back to nothingness. If she communicated what Anna told her to the society, and that knowledge got out to the rest of the world, then the rest of the world would complete its deathly march towards the apocalypse, to paraphrase Logier. Perversely, yet poetically, Mademoiselle becomes a martyr in favor of life, because it would be better to doubt and keep on living than to remove all doubt and necessitate death. The most important reason that I hold to this interpretation is because it lines up best with Logier's statements regarding what the film is actually about. It would mean that Anna actually did something with her pain, that there was a point to all the suffering. She, like Mademoiselle after her, became a martyr for life and against death. The knowledge she gleaned from the afterlife turned her from the helpless victim in the worst imaginable circumstance into the greatest hero. That knowledge defeated the unconscionable evil of Mademoiselle and the society. Now some might say, well, we don't know that. Maybe the society would just continue their efforts. Maybe, but if they did, whoever replaced Mademoiselle would find themselves in the same situation, asking themselves the same question. Do they choose to perpetuate that knowledge and bring about the apocalypse? Or do they choose doubt, and thus, life? Do you think you have a better interpretation? I would genuinely love to hear it in the comment section below. Please leave a like if you like this video, that helps me out a lot. Until next time, I would like to wish you all a safe, fun, and happy Halloween, and of course, as always, stay yellow.